let me start with the basic question. What got you chasing halfway around the world on this story?
I first heard a story by the Toronto Star reporter Michelle Shepard about a young man who was publicly amputated inside of a stadium in Somalia. And I realized it was the first time this was in 2012, November, that I had thought about Somalia. Like, it had been a really long time, Black Hawk Down long time since I had thought about it. And then later in the summer, I approached Brian Belenkoff after several months of research and thinking about, okay, is there a hope thread inside of this turnaround story that's happening in Somalia? And that was really kind of the impetus for, is there something that can be done here through storytelling, through soccer, but not your traditional film, that allows you to really get a look at storytelling through the eyes of young people that really very rarely do we see from that part of the globe.
Well, why soccer? What was it that caught your eye by that?
Bonadir Stadium, there's two stadiums in Mogadishu that have historical significance. And Bonadir Stadium is one. And it had just gotten turf installation by FIFA at the end of 2012. So I saw news stories about that inside of various reports that were coming out there were typically negative. And I saw that story, and that felt kind of hopeful. And then you heard about the Somali national team. And there was also this story running around that Mogadishu Stadium may eventually get funding support. And we realized, and that's where I made that association, the film adaptation of Black Hawk Down. That's where our troops go running back to. And it also is was the crown jewel of the region. So I felt, wow, and it becomes a turnaround story. Brian and I talk about this a lot. If that place comes back, the city's back. Because it's the most strategic military point in the city. So that really kind of got us thinking about soccer and the national team thread.
It's the closest thing to a fortress in the city.
And has been regularly used by a lot of different people for various non-soccer activities, some of them pretty brutal.
Yeah, I mean, because it's the strategic point in the city, it really, every time there's a regime change or, for the last 3 decades, it's really been kind of the source of a lot of pain, and it used to be the source of so much hope. And I think that for us was an important piece that we wanted to try to, infuse into the story.
So you follow 2 young Somali soccer players who are both in the national team and both trying to find a way forward in life. How did you pick those 2? What was it that attracted you?
I mean, I'd say we got to Nairobi. We went to follow them in the Sakafa tournament, which is their only time that they get to play outside of Somalia. It's televised, so it's the only opportunity they have for scouts, agents to see them play. And on the first day, Sadiq, one of the players, just came right up to me and spoke, pretty decent English, and was just very, outgoing, and everyone else was very shy. And immediately we knew there was something very special about this guy. He just had this very worldly philosophy, and realized that there was more opportunity outside of Africa, and they love watching soccer in the Premier League, and that's what they want.
And we'd ask them to fill out a form too,
right,
of questions, and he'd say, "Hey, my friend Saad has a really difficult story. Like, I think it's too hard for him to write." And that was the very first night that we realized that Saad had been captured by Al-Shabaab.
There is a very sad moment in the film where you begin to chronicle how pretty much every member, not all of them, but almost every member of the Somali national team has lost someone close to them or had something wretched happen to them or someone close to them as a result of the conflict there. I mean, was this apparent when you started interacting with these guys?
It's so funny to reflect on. It's not funny. That's a very serious question. But when you think about when we first met the Somali national team, you don't feel that. They have this sense of, it's like they can tuck all the pain away and present you with these smiles that are completely disarming. And, as a filmmaker and a storyteller, you want to get to the heart of the emotion, and it's almost hard to even discern, is that even there? And it took a while to ask the questions to get to that place.
There's also like a masculinity thing. It's like, sure, they don't want to show vulnerability culturally, and I think with any culture that experiences a lot of tragedy, they like to find humor to get over those things. And so they were very like, they like cracking jokes all the time. So they were very happy regardless.
But it really kind of also shows the resilience of not just the members of the team, but the Somali people as a whole coming through this wretched experience.
That's when we start to peel back the layers and you realize, whoa, I mean, there's real pride around this team. I mean, every national team can find that pride. This is a resiliency pride. That's why it's called Men in the Arena. That's why it's called from the famous Roosevelt speech about just being engaged and, just participating alone feels significant. And I think that is to the very root of what resiliency is. And we can find hope, we can find joy just in the being there. That's really, and you can't help but feel that right away. And we of course felt that with Saad and Sadiq immediately.
So what were the challenges for you as filmmakers shooting in Mogadishu and around Somalia?
How much time do you have?
A lot, I take it.
That's right, because it's really been how do you tell a story about a place where the archives are destroyed, where your subjects are petrified to potentially open up to you and share because the consequences are so steep. And once you get that trust, then what do you do with it? How do you represent the story in the right way? And then it's, as you had mentioned, it's about two friends. Well, one friend was in Nairobi, and the other friend was in Mogadishu, and in fact, most of the time outside of Mogadishu in a village called Afgoye, that I can't even, when I went into Mogadishu, I couldn't even get to him and go to Afgoye, because I would have drawn attention to him. So he's already a notable figure, so if I go with him to his village, all of a sudden, like, where's this guy coming from? This isn't a local story. So there was just all these challenges in that way of how do you even get access to character? And that, I think, really was and then as Brian could speak to for days, the editing challenge of dealing with the different dialects in Somalia. And that's where I think it comes to the Somali community here in the U.S. that was so beautiful for us is, there's a young woman here in Minneapolis named Honey who helped a lot with translation. And we just loaded clips for days to YouTube and a Tumblr blog that was private. And Brian and myself and her and a couple other people in the diaspora, like we all worked together to do that translation. And it took a long, long, long time.
Yeah, I'd say, especially on the ground, it becomes a challenge where you start rolling on something and you don't know what's important. If someone could be saying something really impactful, and we won't find out till months later when we have it translated. You just don't know.
So, as an editor, what did that mean for you? Beyond just wandering around in the fog of incomprehension.
It meant a lot of patience, because there'd be scenes that we could go ahead and cut, and then there'd be other parts where we'd have to dig through footage, get it translated, and then decide if there was something worth keeping versus, we just, spent hours translating this clip, and,
So you filter through a lot of stuff that you think was impactful at the time. And that's with any film, right, where it's a different language. But this one's particularly difficult because Saad, the one young man, speaks a different dialect of Somali. So just getting to the access of that and fully understand, and he wasn't educated either. So there's a level of, when he first got to the national team, he was like the farm kid. So imagine, it's funny to wrap your head around that if you come from a different part of town. It's no different than any other place in the world. It's almost like he had a deep Boston accent or a deep, a Louisiana accent or something. So working through some of that stuff, even if we had a translator with us, was still a real challenge.
And you also had to have protection when you were going around too. There's a lot of shots of people sitting in jeeps with large guns.
Yeah, that's the unfortunate challenge of storytelling there, is that there's a wire. So when you get to Mogadishu airport, and then that's where AMISOM, the African Union Mission in Somalia, is. That's where all the embassies that are just now starting to come back, all of them are stationed there. And then once you leave the wire, well, that's actually where you connect with people. That's where all the real life is happening. That's where the city's coming back. But the ability, because of targeted attacks, that's where it's also the most dangerous. So the juxtaposition of those two ideas is really, it's tragic too, because it's so beautiful once you're just amongst the people, and the shorelines, as you see in the film, it's stunning. But it's so hard to get there and get on the ground and really grasp the true pieces of storytelling that you want to get to.
So you're here in Minnesota. You're doing several screenings, culminating with the showing at the Parkway. What are you hoping to gain from this?
I think that Somalia so often gets this single story attached to it, this single story of fear, and this single story of bad. It's just been 30 years of 3 decades of trauma. And I think for us, it was an opportunity to let young people tell their story and be hope for a generation of young people that back in Somalia, Saad and Sadiq are really well known. Well, now they live in St. Louis, Missouri. They're not so well known here. But I think every time we get to talk about Somalia and people see the film, that's the face they associate with Somalia now. That's a big deal. I think that's how you start to shape the narrative. I mean, we can't fix a war. We can't fix years of chaos and the time that it's going to take to rebuild. But if you don't have a hero when you're growing up, what are you supposed to do? And I think that's what they represent.
In a way, though, the story is just beginning on so many levels, but particularly with Sadiq and Saad. I mean, they're young players and they're early in their careers.
Yeah, and the fact that they live in St. Louis, Missouri now is just it just blows my mind. They actually live with my sister and her husband, and Sadiq is going to St. Louis University and playing. He's starting to really learn the American way of being on the pitch. So it's fun, and Saad, sat in a classroom for the first time in his entire life. Imagine that, at 23 years old, to pick up a pencil for the first time inside of a classroom setting. And so it really is just beginning. And that's terribly exciting.
So more films to come then.
Oh man, that's a great question. This one beat us up for 3 years. Catch us in 7 and we'll talk again.
Gentlemen, thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, I got way too much stuff out there, but this is great. Thank you. Let me just stop.
Yeah, sorry, I
this.
didn't mean to keep you editing.
No. This is public radio. We love this stuff.
Okay.